Hey, welcome back. In this week's episode of Absurd Knife Comparisons, we are going to take the $127 Hogue Deka with some 70, I think it is, dollar scales from Original Goat. I took off the original scales. They were these cheapo FRN scales. Not great. And I put these on here, and I'd say if I threw the titanium ones on there, I think they're like $200 or something crazy like that. It'd probably take it to the next level, but this is definitely a big step up. One of the biggest improvements is right in here, where it's really knocked down inside the scale. The factory ones just have this really sharp edge there, so the grip on the knife feels really great now. And they do some nice jimping on the back here. It's actually very grippy. And it's made it quite a nice little knife. So I thought about the collection and what I could do for absurd knife comparisons on this one. And one came to mind. So here it is. The Oz Roosevelt. Ooh, much stronger detent. Threw me off for a second there. This one's like new in box, so it is really crisp. And this is a pretty recent one. This is Roosevelt number 1202. So this is just like a month old. Was never carried, never cut with. It's basically a brand new knife, just like the Hogue Deka is there. And makes for a really great comparison here. So excited to do this one. One that has been kind of on my mind is something to pit up against the Roosevelt. And I hadn't quite figured out one that would make sense, so this is kind of fun. So let me think through this a little bit. The first thing is going to be feel in hand. That's become, pocket feel is definitely one of my top things. Don't get me wrong, and these are both good in the pocket. But let's start with feel in hand. So the feel in hand is really good on this Hogue Deka. The ability to get into different positions for draw cuts because they have this kind of interesting little insert area here. The push cut with the thumb feels really good. The overall sizing, it has some good contours in it, but it feels somewhat neutral and flexible. You don't feel like you need to grab it just right. It just seems to go into the hand where it should. Balance feels pretty good and stuff. So very, very good there now that it's got the new scales. You do feel like it's aluminum. It definitely doesn't feel like titanium, so I'd take off like a little point there just for the quality of the feel. Aluminum. It's reminiscent of a tin can, right? So there's a little bit of that there. This one, definitely a step up. Just a little more generous that I immediately felt there. Maybe like a little more, I'd say like the front two fingers feel better on this one. Draw cut's okay. It's not quite as good, probably. It's good, but there's no jimping up here. Push cut feels really, really good. Super solid. The fingers in the front, again, feel really good. In the back, I don't know if it's because of the pocket clip, but it's a little less comfortable in the back. It's kind of simple back there. So I almost kind of like the feel in hand a little more maybe on the I think the Roosevelt kind of takes it, but just slightly, just probably because it's titanium. If I had gone and spent $200 on the scales here, that'd have been great. But look, sub $200 knife and $850 knife, something like that. Not to mention on the secondary, these are going for $1,100-$1,200 because scalpers. Next one is feel in pocket. I'd say the feel in pocket on these is going to be pretty similar. The Roosevelt has, a decent pocket clip here. It's nicely milled out and stuff. So definitely a higher quality, but that is very strong and it could definitely get caught on the pocket a little bit. But the size of the knife, only 3 ounces, pretty awesome. So I'm just gonna take these off screen here real quick and put them in pocket. The feel of the pocket clip over here is just a little better, probably a little easier to get in from that perspective, but it's super cheapo. But this came out to what, 2.6 ounces, 2.75 ounces, so it's a slightly lighter build. Once it was complete, it gained about half an ounce versus factory. 2.87, a little more than I remember. Oh, you know what? I had weighed it with different scales that had more metal taken out. So yeah, actually quite a bit heavier. So very similar actually to the Rosie in that sense. Almost the same weight in this case. Let's throw that on there. 2.94, so within 1/10 of the ounce. So yeah, they're pretty equal, I'd say. They basically both have their benefits. Neither is like what I'd call like a 10 out of 10 from a pocket perspective, but for what the Rosie is, you know, it's one of the best EDCs from a carry perspective for an expensive knife. It's very unusual to have such a lightweight, high quality knife. I don't really think there's much out there like it, honestly. So I'd say those would be probably a draw on the pocket feel, but give the nod to the Rosie just because it's you're getting a very quality knife that's fun to show off, which, you know, sometimes your pocket clip is a little bit of a pocket jewelry, right? So let's see. The next element would be the blade shape. Really like the Rosie blade shape. You have enough flat edge down here and then some nice belly and, you know, not too crazy of a tip. And it kind of all ends up pointing down a little bit. So it's not a spear point, but it actually effectively works like almost somewhere between a spear point and a sheep's foot, which I think is really cool. Just because the angle of the knife ends up, you know, you can see this is pretty straight across. So the distance at equal, you're only dropping a certain amount. If you look at the spine of this knife, it's actually dropping quite a bit more. And so it's a little more accessible for like a draw cut or a, you know, kind of utility type use. So I really like that about the Rosie. The blade shape on the Deca is like a little pointy and a little thin, just feels a little flimsy to me. It's not that much thicker or less thin, I should say, than the Rosie. The Rosie at the very tip ends up thinning out quite a bit, as you can see. But back here where you interact with it, it's a little more generous, you know, versus this guy. Maybe I can hold them both up here and we can kind of compare. You can see if I go neck to neck there, the blade length is a little longer on the Hogue Deka, but it all kind of just narrows sooner and then less total. So it's a very different blade shape. Not a huge difference, but definitely different, right? Very flat. I do like this long flat area a lot on the Hogue Deka. That to me is really nice. But absent a sheep's foot, that becomes a little less interesting to me. And I actually kind of like the way that this ends up being. So I'll probably give a slight nod to the Rosie on this one, but not a huge one. Deployment, this is a pretty easy one for me. This deployment's never great to me. You have to kind of do it just right to get the knife out because it's the spring-based and it's just not a very strong spring, so it doesn't have a lot of detent to kind of let you ramp up. If you put your fingernail behind it and you really flick like that, it's light, easy, but the problem is you can't just kind of snap it forward. Like you can, but you have to be very precise and you almost have to push in this direction across the scale as opposed to a natural flick is going to be like that. You kind of have to flick it this way so you get a little load here and then it'll pop out. So that to me is not great. It's not my favorite knife to deploy. However, the rollout is brilliant. It's really nice, and the ability to put it back in with the, you know, with the locking mechanism is pretty nice too. So it has a little bit of the fidget factor here. It's not quite on the level of like a Shark Lock from Demco, but very good. But man, one of the most satisfying deployments of any knife I've ever had has to be this this Rosie. And sorry, I just did some lock bar pressure on myself there. And man, it snaps out so well. It has 2 detent balls. If you're not familiar with how this thing works, it actually has dual detent balls, as you can see in there. Hopefully I can get enough light in there that you can see it and focus. And it is so smooth. It's pretty good at stopping you from getting the lock bar pressure. It still can be a victim of it, but it's not the most lock bar pressure sensitive frame lock. In fact, I'd say it's one of the least sensitive lock bar pressure frame locks that I've had. And it's just amazingly good. It's just so satisfying. The sound, the feel. It's one of the best deployments I have, and I have to give this one a strong nod over the Deca. It's just a lot nicer to deploy this knife than it is to deploy that knife. It is a special reverse flick experience. The best reverse flicks I can think of in my collection. Fit and finish. Clear win to the rosy, but you know, you're talking about 70%, you know, for 17% of the price or something like that. I don't know what the price, call it 25% of the price, you're getting 70% of the fit and finish. You know, maybe 60, 70% because some of the little things, but yeah, it's not super far off for a lot less price. So fit and finish is better. Let's go to value, and then that's just a really quick, easy answer. The value's way better. These are both Magnacut, by the way. So blade steel is a draw. Actually, you know what? Slight nod to the rosy because these Decas are known for being not super high on the Rockwell hardness. They undergun that a little bit. It's a pretty early adoption of the Magnacut, which I love. Great job getting it and using it and stuff. But these have like a 63 to 64 Rockwell hardness for Magnacut. And so I have to give the nod slightly to the rosy because of the increased Rockwell hardness. Value, blow away, you know, 10 out of 10. This is one of the best. USA made all the way around, right? The knife is $127, USA made, not hand ground, but machine ground in the US. And then you get the scales, also USA made from Original Goat. You're under 200 bucks. An amazing value. That's a really nice American made knife for $200. Nothing really out there like it, which is why I'm doing this one. I can't think of a $200 USA made knife that compares to this once you've made this modification. But you know, it's not technically the original knife, so they don't get credit for it. I have seen that they did start bringing out fat carbon scales for it, and they're like 165, 170 bucks. Smoky Mountain Knife Works, I think, brought out that version, so I'd love to get my hands on one. I kind of balked and missed it. I should have done it. I didn't buy it, but that fit and finish is probably, you know, one of the best value American-made knives out there for 165 bucks with carbon scales. They probably even feel better than this, to be honest. We'll see. I'd have to go get my hands on it, but that's very, very appealing to me. What are some of the other elements I look at? Fit and finish. I think that's just about it, right? So overall, the nod still goes to the rosy, but you're talking about $200 investment versus an $800 to $1,200 investment, depending how badly you go pay on the secondary market. Please don't pay $1,200. I don't recommend it. I don't think we should all be price gouging that much on rosies anyways, and they're not quite worth that in my opinion, but they are damn good knives that are well worth, you know, 1,000, maybe 1,100 at the peak. I'd pay that from the manufacturer if I could get one new from the manufacturer. I don't like the idea of paying it to some scalper in the secondary market that got it the day after and didn't want it anyways and just did it to get money, because that means that's a spot that one of us that wanted the knife didn't get, right? They're not selling these knives for you to go out there and scalp them. They're selling them for us to buy them, enjoy them, use them, appreciate them in the community. And, you know, if the demand on these is something like 20 to 1, right? There's probably 1,400 now that have been made, and there's probably, I don't know how many, 20,000, 30,000 people that want one or something crazy like that. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's not like your average knife carrier wants this knife. It's that part of the community that wants the upper echelon of knives, but, you know, there are only so many of them, so the people that are buying them and reselling them for more are just kind of screwing the rest of us that want them. Anyways, that to me is a really good absurd knife comparison and a really fun one, and I hope you enjoyed it. Nod to the rosy from a knife perspective, nod to the Hogue Deka for the value perspective. So I'll see you on the next one. Take care.